A few days ago, Ryan and I decided to go camping in a remote forest. We had been planning it for a while, wanting to escape the noise of the city and just be surrounded by nature. We found the perfect spot by a quiet river, deep in the woods. There was no one around, just endless trees and the soft sound of flowing water. It felt peaceful, like a place where nothing bad could ever happen. After setting up our tent, we sat by the river, watching the sun slowly disappear behind the trees. The air was crisp and the forest came alive with the sounds of insects and distant rustling. We knew the woods would get louder at night, but we weren't worried. We had camped before, and neither of us scared easily. We even brought a knife, just in case. As darkness crept in, Ryan decided to put our food in the car so it wouldn't attract animals. Our car was parked about 20 meters away, hidden behind some bushes. I stayed by the river, listening to the water, feeling the cool air against my skin. But as soon as Ryan disappeared from sight, a strange feeling crept over me. My stomach tightened, and my senses sharpened like something inside me was warning me to stay alert. I kept glancing toward the car, trying to catch a glimpse of Ryan. I felt uneasy, but I told myself I was just overthinking. Then Ryan called out to me from the darkness, telling me to keep an eye on him. That was weird. He never said things like that. When he returned, he crouched beside me, his face pale. He whispered that he had heard something heavy moving in the trees. He wasn't joking. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to check it out, so we grabbed the knife and our flashlights. We walked toward the car, the light from our flashlights cutting through the dark. Then I heard it too. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. At first, I thought it could be a deer, but the sound was wrong. It wasn't 4 legs, it was 2. It moved when we moved. It stopped when we stopped. It was following our rhythm, as if it was playing a game with us. My whole body went cold. I felt a wave of panic, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. We stood frozen, listening. The night felt deeper, heavier, like something was pressing in on us from all sides. Ryan tightened his grip on the knife, scanning the trees. I could feel something watching us. Not just an animal's curiosity, but something else. Something unnatural. We turned and rushed back to the tent. I grabbed everything important and we sprinted to the car. The moment I got inside, I locked the doors. Ryan slid in and started the engine. As the headlights flickered on, I saw movement, something shifting in the trees. But the second I tried to focus on it, it was gone. Just darkness and shadows swaying in the wind. We drove away, not stopping until we found a small parking lot near an old hiking trail. We sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. Ryan told me that when he first walked to the car, he already had a bad feeling, like something was hiding just out of sight. When he heard the footsteps, his whole body tensed. He swore he saw something in the trees, a shape, but it was too fast, too shadowy to make sense of. I wanted to believe it was a person. Some creep lurking in the woods, but deep down, I wasn't sure. It didn't feel human. It felt wrong. We decided to sleep in the car. I curled up in the passenger seat, trying to calm my nerves. Ryan stayed awake for a while, gripping the knife, staring out into the night. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and we both drifted into uneasy sleep. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up with a start. The car felt different, like something outside was pressing against it. The air was heavy, suffocating. I turned to Ryan, but he was still asleep, his breathing slow and steady. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, just beyond the trees. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of something tall, too tall, with limbs that seemed slightly wrong, slightly off. I blinked, and it was gone. I sat there, frozen, my pulse racing. I wanted to wake Ryan, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I just sat, staring out into the darkness, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The night stretched on in silence, thick and suffocating. At some point, I must have fallen asleep again, because the next thing I knew, the sun was rising, casting pale light through the trees. The heaviness in the air was gone, but my body felt stiff, like I had spent the entire night tensed in fear. Ryan stirred beside me, rubbing his eyes before looking around. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he felt it too. That unease, that sense that we weren't alone. Without a word, we started the car and drove away. The road back to town felt endless, winding through miles of empty forest. Every so often I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something standing at the edge of the trees, watching us leave. But there was nothing, just shadows and the endless stretch of wilderness behind us. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that something was out there, something that wasn't supposed to be. Watching, waiting. I don't think I'll ever go camping again. I've lived in my current apartment for 2 years now. It's a quiet place just 2 blocks from campus, and until recently I never had any problems. I live alone with my small emotional support dog, Daisy. She's never been much of a guard dog, but she's always been my little source of comfort. A month ago, a new neighbor moved into the unit below me. His name is Martin. He's thin, pale, with sharp blue eyes that never seem to blink enough. Something about him always felt off, but I couldn't quite place it at first. The first time I met him, I was trying to back my car out of the parking lot when another driver blocked my way. I was about to step out and ask them to move when Martin intervened. He told the driver to pull forward before I even had the chance to say anything. I thanked him and left, but the way he stood there watching me as I drove away made me uncomfortable. The next morning, I found him waiting outside as I left for class. He walked his bike beside me the entire way up the hill, asking me questions that felt a little too personal. Where was I from? How old was I? Was I single? How long had I lived here? His curiosity made me uneasy, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just socially awkward. A few days later, at 8 in the morning, I was woken up by loud knocking. Groggy and confused, I looked through the peephole. It was Martin, standing there, rocking back and forth. I didn't answer. He knocked again, and again. Then, silence. A few moments later, I heard something sliding under my door. When I was sure he was gone, I picked up the note. It was about Daisy. He wanted to know how I managed to have her in the apartment, said he was interested in getting a dog but didn't know the process. He left his number and asked me to text him. I never did. Something about him knowing exactly where I live despite me never telling him didn't sit right with me. After that, things changed. I noticed him watching me every time I stepped outside. I'd be carrying groceries, and I'd see him standing behind his blinds, barely hidden, his eyes locked on me. Sometimes I'd catch him just standing by his window, motionless, staring at my door. One evening, I took Daisy outside to let her play in the grass behind the building. When I turned around, I saw Martin standing near the back of the building. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze was fixed on me. I walked back inside without looking at him, my skin crawling with unease. A week passed and his behavior escalated. Every morning when I left, he'd be outside, pretending to check his bike or look at his phone. But he wasn't doing either. He was watching. And at night, I'd hear faint shuffling noises outside my door. I told myself it was just the old apartment settling, but deep down, I knew better. Then, 2 nights ago, I woke up to Daisy growling. She was at the foot of my bed, her little body tense, her gaze locked on my bedroom door. I listened. My apartment was silent, but there was something outside. A faint scratching, like fingers against wood. I held my breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The scratching stopped. Then I heard a slow, deliberate exhale through the crack under my door. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in bed, clutching Daisy, listening for any more signs of movement. The next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. The doormat outside my door had been flipped upside down, and there were faint smudges on my door handle, like someone had been testing if it was locked. That same day, I told my landlord everything. He said he'd talked to Martin, but I wasn't convinced it would help. That night, I barricaded my door with a chair and slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up again to Daisy growling. This time, I heard something different, a low, muffled whisper. Not words, just sounds. Right outside my bedroom window. I live on the 2nd floor. Daisy started barking, and suddenly there was a loud thump against the glass. I screamed, jumped out of bed, and turned on every light in my apartment. When I looked outside, there was nothing there. Just darkness and the swaying of tree branches in the wind. The next morning, I walked outside to find Martin standing by his bike, staring at my window. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing smile, like he knew I hadn't slept, like he knew what I heard. I don't know what he wants, and I don't want to find out. I've started locking my bedroom window every night. I make sure my door is always bolted, but I can't shake the feeling that he's waiting, watching, and sooner or later he's going to try again. Three years ago, I lived in a quiet coastal town in a small apartment near the cliffs. It was a basement-level unit, half submerged underground, which meant my windows were at ground level. The place was old, with creaky floors and locks that never quite worked right, but it was home. I lived there with my boyfriend at the time, Lucas. One evening, Lucas came home from work while I was curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone. As soon as he walked in, he immediately rushed to the window near me, pushing aside the curtain and looking out. His reaction startled me. He didn't say anything, just quickly moved from window to window, checking each one, then disappeared outside. When he finally came back, he told me that as he was walking up, he saw someone crouch by the window, looking inside. The man had taken off the second Lucas noticed him. My stomach turned. The idea of someone watching me so closely right outside my window made my skin crawl. But it was broad daylight and people passed by all the time. Maybe it was just a neighbor, we told ourselves, a random passerby. We convinced ourselves it was nothing, but it wasn't. Over the next few months, I noticed strange things. Some mornings I'd wake up and find the front door unlocked, even though I was certain we had locked it the night before. I'd hear faint knocks late at night, but when I checked, no one was there. Small things went missing: a scarf, a single sock, a hairbrush. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful. Then one night, everything changed. Lucas and I were arguing, nothing serious, but we were raising our voices. It was around midnight, and the only light came from the dim bulb over the kitchen sink. As we stood there, frustrated and exhausted, I glanced toward the window behind him. At first, I thought I was looking at my own reflection in the glass. But my reflection wasn't moving. There was a face in the window. A man's face. Eyes wide, unblinking, his nose almost pressed against the screen. I froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. He was too close. His face was perfectly level with the glass, which meant he had to be crouching or lying on the ground. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I gripped Lucas' arm instead. He frowned at me, confused, until I whispered, barely audible, that someone was watching us. By the time he turned around, the man was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I filed a police report, but there wasn't much they could do. No security cameras, no real evidence. Just a description of a man who could be anyone. Lucas started leaving a baseball bat by the door, and I started double-checking the locks, even though I knew they weren't reliable. And then one night, I realized how much worse it was than I thought. Lucas was working late, and I was alone. It was nearly 2 a.m., and I was sitting on the couch with my laptop, listening to music through my headphones. The apartment was completely silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I had been sitting there for at least an hour when I noticed something strange. The door to the small utility closet, the one that held the water heater, was open. I stared at it, my heart hammering. I knew for a fact that it had been closed earlier. I never opened it. The air in the apartment felt suddenly suffocating. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to breathe. Then I saw it. Fingers. Pale, barely visible in the dim light, wrapped around the edge of the door. Someone was inside. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run. I bolted. No shoes, no jacket. I just ran straight out into the cold night air, sprinting down the street toward the restaurant where Lucas worked. My feet were raw from the pavement, my lungs burning, but I didn't stop. When I got there, I could barely form words. Lucas and his coworkers rushed back to the apartment with me, but by the time we got there, the door was wide open. The closet was empty. After that, we didn't stay much longer. We packed up and moved across the country to be closer to my family, thinking that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks ago, I heard a knock on my door in the middle of the afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I ignored it. But then they knocked again. And again. Slow, deliberate. By the third knock, I felt a familiar unease creep up my spine. I waited, listening, until the knocking stopped. When I finally checked through the peephole, no one was there. No package, no flyer, nothing. 2 days later, I went out for groceries. I was gone for less than an hour. When I came back, I noticed something off. The deadbolt was locked. The deadbolt that could only be locked from the inside. My stomach turned to lead. I stood frozen at my own front door, knowing with absolute certainty that someone had been inside my apartment while I was gone. I called my boyfriend and my sister before stepping inside. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was out of place. Whoever had been there hadn't come to take anything. They had just been there. That night, we set up security cameras. My boyfriend took this seriously, unlike Lucas had. I filed another police report, but I already knew what they would say. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of a break-in. That was 3 days ago. Last night, I woke up to a sound, softer than a knock, barely audible. I didn't move at first, just listened, my breath shallow. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. The closet door. Not open this time, just barely ajar, like someone had been standing there, watching. I didn't sleep after that. I haven't slept since, and I can't shake the horrible sinking feeling in my gut. The feeling that this isn't over.